Welcome everyone to the first of the series of Pesach preparatory classes. It is such a pleasure to see everyone. Before we begin, just want to start by thanking our sponsors for this week's Zoom classes, sponsored by Zachary and Sigali Dimenstein in honor of Shiloh's bar mitzvah, and we are just so happy for the Dimenstein family on this tremendous simcha, and that your family should continue to have nachas and go from strength to strength and continue to celebrate through the avenue of Torah. Also sponsored by the shul, by the board of directors, myself and Brooke, and Rabbi and Shashi, in honor of our unsung heroes of the community, are especially over this last year during the pandemic, as we've approached a year anniversary since the shutdowns here in La Jolla and all over the United States. And we thank our Gabayim, our laners, daveners, and our COVID compliance team, our security team, everybody that keeps the shul going and thriving, and also sponsored by the Feifel family in honor of their new grandson, Avi Oz Shaked Littman, who was born just over a week ago, and we wish a mazel tov to the Feifel family. And thank you again to all of our sponsors. If anyone would like to sponsor a class, please feel free to speak to myself, or you can reach out to the office. Happy to help. So this year is a very unique year on so many different levels. It is unique as last year was very unique in that we are celebrating Pesach again in a pandemic. Now, it's a little different than last year because this year, at least, God willing, we will be having Pesach services at shul. They're not going to be the way that they normally look, but there are services happening. But in addition to the fact that it is strange because it's Pesach again in a pandemic, but it's also very unique because this year is one of those rare years. It is a year that Erev Pesach, the day prior to Pesach, falls out on Shabbos. And we'll talk about, after we go through all of the guidelines that one needs to be prepared for in a very, very practical way, we'll also talk about the fact that actually serves as a real opportunity. I myself am very much looking forward to the fact that this year Erev Pesach is on Shabbos, because I'm not going to be zonked at the Seder. Brooke's not going to be zonked at the Seder. Frankly, the kids are not going to be zonked at the Seder, because it is not going to be a day where everyone is running around, but rather a day where we can have Shabbos, and then Shabbos leads into the Seder. Everyone is going to be invigorated, God willing, for a beautiful, beautiful Yom Tov. It's going to really kick it off with a bang. But let's talk about some of the practicalities, because there's a number of practicalities this year that don't exist in a normal year. The major conundrum we'll talk about in just a few minutes. The major conundrum has to do with the fact that is that on Erev Pesach, we have a prohibition of eating chametz, but every single Shabbos, we are obligated to eat chametz, being that we have to have challah. And on Erev Pesach, we also can't have matzah. So like the easy solution would have been, oh, you know what, let's just start Pesach early and we'll just start all eating matzah. That's a problem because the day before Pesach, you can't eat matzah. So we'll talk about that big catch-22 in just a few moments. But first, let's talk about some of the easier issues. And we'll just literally go in a chronological order, go one by one, going by each issue one after another. We'll start with the easier things and go in a chronological order. So I'm going to share my screen over here. First, I want to point out that the shul sent out some guidance on this to make it easier for everybody. This is kind of like the cliff notes of what we're going to be speaking about this evening. A really, hopefully, very simple and straightforward step-by-step process and summary of everything we're going to be speaking about. But let's begin. Number one, the first issue at hand is, when do the firstborns fast this year? Generally speaking, we have an institution that the day before Pesach, Erev Pesach, there is a fast for firstborns that's cited in the Shulchan Aruch. It's recorded in the Shulchan Aruch, And this fast of the firstborns is in order to celebrate it, in order to highlight the fact that God only plagued the Egyptian firstborns and saved the Jewish firstborns. And because of that, there is a fast in order to recognize the fact that the fragility, that it's everything. Our lives are in the balance. That at any moment Hashem could make a decision, and then that's it. Then our time of reckoning is here, and the plague of the firstborns was a wake-up lesson for the other firstborns, the Jewish firstborns. And therefore, we have taken upon ourselves a fast in order to recognize Hashem's might over the world and to thank Hashem for having saved the Bechoros, the firstborns. So the question at hand is, this year, when do the firstborns, quote unquote, fast? Now, usually the firstborns don't actually end up fasting. That's because most of them end up attending a siyum, a sudas mitzvah. When you attend a celebration of Torah, a bris milah, etc. So you do not have to fast because you have joined in with the simcha of whoever is making a siyum, and that's exactly what we're going to do. That the morning that we are going to be the day of whenever the fast is, usually it's the day before Pesach, there's a siyum that morning. But when is that day? When's the siyum going to take place? When is the fast, for those that actually are going to fast, going to happen? So this is a question that is cited by the Trumas Hadeshen. The Trumas Hadeshen was a 15th century halachic authority that has a collection of responsa that is heavily cited in the Shulchan Aruch, the work by Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Code of Jewish Law. And in fact, it's actually quite a fascinating work, because the Trumas Hadeshen, unlike other responsa, right? Responsa, by as the name suggests, is that someone sends a question and then they receive an answer. But with regard to the Trumas Hadeshen, this was actually a authorship style of the Trumas Hadeshen, that stylistically he wrote the questions and wrote the answers to his questions as well. So the question that is asked by the Trumas Hadeshen is our question: Erev Pesach, the day before Pesach, that is Shechal Lios B'Shabbos, that comes out on Shabbos. So Misanin HaBechoros, do the firstborns fast? Because generally speaking, we don't fast on Shabbos. Olav, or is there no fast at all? Ve'im Misanin, and if there is a fast, Be'eze Yom Misanin. When are they going to fast? When is the fast of the firstborns? Says the Trumas Hadeshen the following: Tshuva. The answer is as follows: Yira'eh, it would seem to me that the Misanin and B'Yom Chamishi, that the fast is on Thursday, Shilifnei HaShabbos. The Thursday prior to Shabbos is when that fast is. And he says that I actually noticed this in one of the writings of the Rokeach. The Rokeach was a very early Rishon, a very early medieval commentator, that when he was young, he noticed that the Rokeach writes the same thing, that he feels that the fast is going to be taking place on Thursday. And that's exactly what is cited in the Shulchan Aruch. That the Shulchan Aruch says, Imchal Erev Pesach b'Shabbos, that if the day before Pesach falls on Shabbos, Yesh Omrim Shemisanin Machorim B'Yom Hey. That there are those that say, namely the Trumas Hadeshen, that the fast will take place on Thursday. Says the Ramah, Rabbi Moshe Isserlis, the counterpart of Rabbi Yosef Karo. Rabbi Yosef Karo lived 1488 to 1575. He was born in Spain. He lived there till he was 4 years old, and 1492, during the Spanish Inquisition, was exiled along with his family. They traveled through the Ottoman Empire, ended up in Turkey, throughout the Ottoman Empire, and then ended up in the land of Sfat, I believe, in 1530. And it was there that he authored his major work, the Beis Yosef, an encyclopedia on all of Jewish law, and then wrote an index to that work called the Code of Jewish Law, the Shulchan Aruch. And this is the Shulchan Aruch that we rely on so heavily. So says Rabbi Yosef Karo that the fast would take place on Thursday, and this is concurred with his counterpart, the Ashkenazi counterpart, Rab Moshe Isserlis, who actually lived a much, much shorter life than Rabbi Yosef Karo. While Rabbi Yosef Karo lived to the age of 87 years old, Rabbi Moshe Isserlis only lived according to some historians, only to the age of 30, other historians to the age of 40. He lived an incredibly short life, but incredibly impactful life. In Krakow, he passed away in 1572. Says Rav Moshe Isserlis, the Ramah, Aval Yesh Linhok Esfara Rishona, that we follow the first opinion cited in the Shulchan Aruch that the fast of the firstborns is on Thursday, and therefore the Siyum is going to take place on Thursday. So tell all the firstborns you know, make sure that Thursday morning they make it to shul in order so that they can be part of the Siyum that is going to be taking place that Thursday. And if they're not, then they are going to have to fast that Thursday morning prior to Pesach. Also, question, when is Shabbos HaGadol this year? Shabbos HaGadol, we know, is the Shabbos before Pesach. Now, Shabbos before Pesach this year is Erev Pesach. So if the Shabbos HaGadol drasha, which is, the Shabbos HaGadol is one of the 2 times during the year that the big drasha is given. One is Shabbos Shuvah, in order to prepare the congregation during Yimei Tshuva, during the days of repentance, for Teshuvah as we approach Yom Kippur, and Shabbos HaGadol in order to prepare the congregation, to prepare the community for Pesach. So if it's the day before Pesach, which the Shabbos for Pesach this year is the day before Pesach, there's not enough time to actually get anything out of the Shabbos HaGadol drasha. You don't have enough time to process all the information that's going to be given, all the insights that would be shared. And therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah that Imchal Shabbos HaGadol be'erev Pesach, that if the Shabbos before Pesach falls on the Shabbos before Pesach falls on Erev Pesach itself, that Shabbos, like this year, so says the Mishnah Berurah, as Dorshim b'Shabbos HaKodim. Therefore, then the Shabbos HaGadol drasha would be the week before, in order so that there's enough time to learn from it. Now, the Aruch HaShulchan says that doesn't necessarily need to be the case, but that's just the prevalent minhag. So that's why this Shabbos, we're going to have the Shabbos HaGadol drasha. So far, 2 points. Number one, we learned that the fast of the firstborns is going to be on Thursday, and that's why the Siyum is going to take place on Thursday. The Shabbos HaGadol is not, while it is technically Shabbos HaGadol, the Shabbos HaGadol drasha is going to be taking place this Shabbos in order so that there's enough time to process the information from the Shabbos HaGadol drasha. Moving right along, we've already discussed 2 differences this year, 2 important differences. Number 3, Bedigas Chametz. Bedigas Chametz, searching for the Chametz. We have an obligation to search for Chametz, because the Rishonim point out that we have to make sure that we search for the Chametz in order so that there is no Chametz in the house during Pesach. We want to make sure that there is no way to slip up on Pesach. We need Chametz as far away. Chametz is evil. Chametz is terrible. We want Chametz out of the house. I don't want to wake up one morning of Pesach feeling all groggy, and I walk over to my cereal cabinet, pull out a box of Cheerios, pour myself a cold bowl, and have myself a bowl of Cheerios. I need Cheerios out of the house. So therefore, we have an obligation of bedikas chametz, cleaning our house, getting rid of our chametz, and we have an official bedika. The official search of the chametz is the night prior to Pesach. So the night of the 14th of Nisan. The night of the 14th of Nisan this year is Friday night. So bedikas chametz, what one has to do in order to fulfill bedikas chametz the right way is you need to do a real search. Real search means checking the nooks and crannies, taking out a flashlight, they used to use a candle, right? To make sure that they get every single spot, make sure that there is no chametz anywhere. Now, obviously, I can't do that on Shabbos. So then when is bedikas chametz going to be? It's going to be the night before that. It's going to be the night of the 13th of Nisan is when bedikas chametz is going to be this year. That is exactly what the Rambam says. Chal arba asar liyos b'Shabbos. That if the 14th of Nisan, the day before Pesach, Erev Pesach, falls on Shabbos, botkin es hachametz beleil Erev Shabbos. We search for the chametz the night of the day before Shabbos, meaning Thursday night. Shehu leil shlosha asar, which is the night of the 13th of Nisan. Umaniach ben chametz, but says the Rambam, just leave over a little bit of chametz in order so you could have it for Shabbos. But we'll talk about that in a moment. So therefore, what do we see from here? We see that bedikas chametz is going to be the Thursday evening this year, the Thursday evening prior to Pesach after sunset. I believe it's something like 7:45, 7:42 or something like that. You'll see the bulletin for the exact times of when it's going to be. And we follow the exact same procedure as we would in a normal year. We make the blessing, we search for the chametz, we make the declaration of nullification of the chametz at the end of kol chamira. We treat it like a regular bedikas chametz. It's just one day earlier. This is what is quoted in the Rambam. This is what is cited in the Shulchan Aruch also. Says the Mishnah Berurah, the editor-in-chief of the Mishnah Berurah was the Chafetz Chaim, who passed away in 1933, was the Tzaddik Hador. He was the most righteous of the generation, without a doubt. He was perhaps the centurion, probably the most influential Jew of the 20th century. His influence is still affecting us today. Without the Chafetz Chaim, how many people out there would not recognize just how evil Lashon Hara is, as just one example. One of his major contributions was that he was the editor-in-chief of the work of the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah is an expansion on the Shulchan Aruch's laws of daily living, all of the current calendaric laws. From the time I wake up in the morning, go to sleep at night, what's happening on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, what's happening on Shabbos, what happens during each month of the year, what happens during the holidays. All of those laws are cited in the Shulchan Aruch, the first section called Orach Chaim, the way of living, and the Mishnah Berurah expanded that. He opened it up. He made it extraordinarily practical, made it something that was accessible. Says the Chafetz Chaim that v'tzarich levarich ala bedika v'gam levatel kemo b'shar shanim. Like any other year, you have to treat this bedika. You have to treat this checking. That even though this checking is technically a day early, usually we do the checking the night before Pesach. Nevertheless, we this year are going to do it a day early, but we treat it exactly the same. We make all the blessings. We follow it exactly the way it is in our Haggadahs. We follow it exactly the way it is in our Sidurim. And that is the way we do Bedikas Chametz. Okay, moving right along. Thursday night. Now moving on to Friday morning. Friday morning, we have the obligation. After we do Bedikas Chametz, what is the natural next step? Now we have all the chametz. What do we have to do with it? We got to get rid of it. We have to burn it. And we have to fulfill the obligation, as it says in the Torah, of tashbitzu. We have to destroy, we have to get rid of all of the chametz that is in our midst. Now, the reason we have to destroy our chametz on Erev Pesach on a normal year is because at a certain point in the day, early in the day, there is a prohibition of having chametz. Therefore, we want to make sure that it is gone by the time that prohibition rolls around, which is just before midday. So just before midday, and again, like I said, the exact times, take a look carefully at all of the communication that's coming out of the office for that. But we want to make sure that there is no chametz around once we get to that point. Now, this year, though, Friday, there is no prohibition of eating chametz. Friday, there's no prohibition of eating chametz. In fact, we're going to get to what our Shabbos meals are going to look like, and our Shabbos meals are going to include chametz. And we'll get to all the details of that, which are very, very important in a second. But why then are we doing the destruction of chametz on Friday if there's no prohibition of eating chametz on Friday? So this is where the Mordechai comes along. The Mordechai is a commentary on the Rif. The Rif, Rabbi Alfasi, took the Talmud and he condensed it into the halachic statements. You want to know what to do after learning all of the discussions that are found in the Talmud. You then turn to the back of the Talmud and you look at the comments of the Rif. The Rif was a very, very early, he passed away, I believe, in like 1108 or something like that. Very, very early Rishon, very, very early Sephardic commentator on the Gemara, on the Talmud. He took the Talmud, made it condensed halachic statements, came along the Mordechai, and he expounded on that. And he added in other opinions, and he was one of the expanders of the Rif, one of the elucidators of the Rif. So comes along the Mordechai and he says that we do the burning of the chametz on Friday when Erev Pesach falls on a Shabbos. Obviously, you can't burn chametz on Shabbos for obvious reasons. You can't burn things on Shabbos, right? So we do it on Friday. We do it the day before. He says for the following reason, because people are going to make mistakes the next year. If we don't keep to the regular structure that we have, then we're human. Humans are bound to make mistakes. And he says this is exactly what Rashi said. Rashi, Rabban Shel Kol Bnei Agola, the teacher of Klal Yisrael, Rashi, perhaps the most influential of all of the Rishonim, he said that is exactly what Rashi's custom was. Friday morning, in a year like this, when Erev Pesach is Shabbos, that is when we do B'digas Chametz. So Friday morning this year, we're going to do B'digas Chametz. That's exactly what is quoted in the Shulchan Aruch. Tov levara be'erev Shabbos, that it's good to do the burning of the Chametz on Erev Shabbos, on Friday, Kodem Chatzos, in the appropriate time that we normally do it. Whatever normal time we do Biur Chametz, destroying Chametz, that is exactly when we're going to be doing it this year also. So this year, 8:30 in the morning, we're going to be having the fire pit, as we normally do, set up right here in the courtyard in order to destroy Chametz. Come drop off your Chametz. Happy to take care of it for you. And we are going to destroy the Chametz. The only difference is that the declaration of nullification is not going to happen on Friday, but rather it's going to happen on Shabbos. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. We have now done our Erev Pesach duties, our duties leading up to Pesach, checking for Pesach, for Chametz, destroying the Chametz. All of that is done Thursday night, Friday morning, following the regular procedure, except Friday morning, you're not going to say the declaration of the destroying of the nullification of the Chametz after you destroy the Chametz. Okay. With that said, now we move into Shabbos. Okay. Let's talk about that catch-22 again. The catch-22 is as follows, and I apologize if I'm moving a little quickly. If I am moving quickly, just send questions into the chat. I want to make things clear, but there's also a lot of information, so I want to move at the same time. You could also always send me questions via email, WhatsApp, text message, give me a call, whatever it is. I'm available to help out whoever I can. And this, again, like I said, is going to be summarized. It already was sent out by the shul. It's going to be sent out again by the shul. So you don't have to worry about that in a Cliff Notes fashion. So we don't have to fret that we're not getting everything down exactly perfectly tonight. Let's talk about that catch-22 again. The catch-22 is that the day before Pesach, there are two things I cannot eat: chametz and matzah. I am not allowed to eat chametz the day before Pesach. We just talked about that. That's why we burn the chametz on Erev Pesach in the morning, because at a certain point I can't eat chametz anymore. This is a prohibition that we must observe, and we have to be extremely careful about this. And the Mishnah talks about, and the Gemara talks about how careful we have to be not to eat chametz on Erev Pesach, the day before Pesach. The other food item I am not allowed to eat on Erev Pesach is matzah. But on matzah, I'm not allowed to eat on Erev Pesach. And the Gemara says that the reason I'm not allowed to eat matzah on Erev Pesach, it says in the Yerushalmi, in the Jerusalem Talmud, that it's because you want to be able to really enjoy matzah when you get to the Seder. You want it to be something fresh, something exciting. You don't want it to be something that has an old taste to it, has an old flavor to it. You want it to be fresh when you get to the Seder, not something that you just ate. And therefore, there is a prohibition, well, a rabbinic prohibition, but no prohibition nevertheless, that one is not allowed to eat matzah on Erev Pesach. There is one opinion, by the way, by the Pri Chadash, that the Pri Chadash says that this prohibition is actually biblically prohibited of eating matzah on Erev Pesach. But nevertheless, there's a prohibition. You're not allowed to have matzah. You're not allowed to have chametz. So what do we do about Shabbos? Shabbos, we have an obligation to have a beautiful Shabbos meal. We have an obligation to have our Oneg Shabbos. We make Kiddush Friday night. We make Kiddush Shabbos morning. And the Kiddush that we make is followed by a Seudah. It's followed by a meal in order so that we can enjoy Shabbos. That meal must consist of lechem mishnah. It must consist of bread. It must consist of 2 loaves of bread. So what do we do now? Because it's Erev Pesach. It's the day before Pesach. I can't eat chametz the day before Pesach after a certain hour. So the easy solution would be, so you know what? Just have matzah for your Shabbos meal. Nope, because you can't eat matzah on Erev Pesach either. So what do you do? So here is what you do. It's the following. And this is all laid out, by the way, by the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish, Rav Avram Shai Karelitz, passed away in 1953, was the leader and really trailblazer of the Bnei Brak community in Israel, was and still is perhaps the most influential rabbinic authority in the Bnei Brak community in Israel. The Chazon Ish was the Posek Ador. He was unbelievable. So the Chazon Ish lays out the whole schedule of what the day looks like, and it basically looks like this. Number 1, as soon as that chametz is burnt, really as soon as bedika happens, as soon as you check for your chametz on Thursday night, like in any other year, your house should be ready to go for Pesach. You should be just as nervous about crumbs as you are in any other year. Except this year, it starts one day earlier. Thursday night is one extra day to make sure that you don't see, you have to be careful with crumbs, to make sure that all the crumbs are out of there, burnt away. Except keep just enough challah in order to fulfill your mitzvah of Shabbos Seudah. And be very careful with that challah, because that challah has dangerous ammunition attached to it. Chametz. So Friday night, when you have your Shabbos Seudah, you're going to make Kiddush, and then you're going to have Hamotzi. The Hamotzi, when you are going to eat your challah, it's a very simple solution. Just eat your challah on the patio, or eat it in a way that you can contain all the crumbs. And as soon as you're done, wrap up the crumbs and keep them nice and tidy and flush them down the toilet. And as soon as you're done with your bread portion of the meal, that should be separate. Either do it in a separate part of the house that could either easily be swept up if there are any crumbs, or you do it outdoors. If you want to do it on a nylon tablecloth, that also would work, in order so you can easily just wrap up those crumbs and flush them down the toilet. Then seal away the challah for tomorrow, or eat it up in order so that and just leave enough challah for the next day. And we'll talk about the next day in a second, okay? But just keep the challah separate. The rest of the meal should all be prepared on chametz, not chametz. It should be prepared on Pesach dishes. It should be prepared like any other Pesach meal you're going to have. Your kitchen is ready to go. Your kitchen is ready to go that Shabbos for Pesach. Think of it like Pesach, except just no matzah. But think of it like Pesach, just without the matzah. So all matzah ingredients can't be used, but you have meat, potatoes, all the delicious, yummy foods that we eat on Pesach. So have that Shabbos minus any matzah or matzah meal, okay? I'm not going to speak to the culinary side of that. You can ask Felicia's on the call. That is what one should do. So just keep the challah separate. Make sure it doesn't contaminate anything. Keep it as far away from everything as possible and sweep up those crumbs. But everything else you're going to eat is Pesach food. Just make sure that there's no matzah ingredients. That's Friday night. Shabbos morning. Now let's talk about Shabbos morning. Shabbos morning poses, as we just pointed out, we have this catch-22. Now we have one more potential hurdle we have to jump through, which is that on Shabbos day, we have not one meal, but we have two meals. Because on Shabbos total, we have 3 meals. We have the first meal Friday night, Shabbos morning, and Shalosh Shudas. Now, all three meals need to have challah, need to have bread. Shalosh Shudas, though, takes place in the afternoon. That's really when Shalosh Shudas is supposed to take place. In fact, did I pull it up? No, I didn't pull it up. But it says in Shulchan Aruch, you really should make sure to have Shalosh Shudas in the afternoon. But one is not allowed to have chametz after, I think, like 11:38 on Shabbos, on Erev Pesach this year. What the exact time? I'll tell you the exact time. That's starting from, from 10:25. Okay, look at the exact times in the bulletin. At 10:25, you cannot eat chametz anymore. So if that's the case, how is one supposed to eat Shalosh Shudas? How are you supposed to have your third meal? So here is the schedule for Shabbos. Make it as simple as possible. Shabbos morning, Shacharis in the shul is going to begin at 7 a.m. So you got to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. 7 a.m. Shacharis is going to be a relatively quicker Shacharis. There's not going to be a drasha. There's not going to be a speech. We're going to daven. It's going to be a nice davening, but it's not going to have any of the frills. We're going to daven with enough time for everyone to get home, to get to work. And now this is eating your Shabbos meals with a purpose. You get home right away, as quickly as you can, make kiddush. Then go wash, and just like Friday night, you're going to eat your challah, your lechem mishnah, your 2 rolls outside in a separate area, easily cleaned area. You're going to eat your 2 rolls and then have a very, very quick first course. I would recommend just a piece of gefilte fish, okay? A very quick first course. As soon as you finish that first course, this whole thing shouldn't take you more than 15 minutes to do. As soon as you finish that first course, bench. You bench. When benching is over, you clean up, you stand up, and you take a little walk around the block. Take a walk you take about a 20-minute break. You go for a walk outdoors, a nice little break. Or if you're not venturing outside, you sit and learn for 20 minutes, a 15, 20-minute break. After that short break, it's time for Shalosh Shudas. You go and you wash. You have hamotzi again. You don't make kiddush again. You don't have the kiddush by Shalosh Shudas. You just have hamotzi. You make hamotzi and you eat your bread in a separate area again. Remember, your house is Pesach. What would be the last thing you would let inside your house or let anywhere near any of your Pesach kitchen is chametz. So just keep that in mind. Keep chametz far, far, far away. Eat your challah, clean up the challah, collect the crumbs, dump the crumbs, obviously in a safe way. You don't want to cause plumbing issues. I have a plumbing issue going on in my house right now. One of our pipes just burst the other day. It should be all cleared away by tomorrow, but you don't want a plumbing issue. So just in a safe way, if there's a few crumbs, you just flush those crumbs down the toilet. And you make your declaration. This declaration should take place before 10:25. That you should make your declaration of the kol chamira, the declaration of the nullification of chametz. And this declaration should take place before. I think I misspoke before. I said before 10:25. It should be before 11:39. Look in the shul communication for the exact times. Don't rely on what I'm saying right now for the exact times. Exact times, look at the shul communication. But you make that declaration, okay? Because what you just did is you just destroyed your chametz. It's like you did beer chametz. It's like you did the burning of the chametz, but instead of burning it, you flushed it down the toilet, which is cited in Shulchan Aruch as actually a totally reasonable approach to getting rid of chametz in general. We try to fulfill it the best way possible. That's why we burn it. But if you're in a pinch and you can't burn it, so you make these small crumbs and you flush it down the toilet. That's perfectly permissible. So that is a fulfillment of the destruction of your chametz. You make your declaration and you finish your Shabbos meal. You have your Shabbos meal, but your Shabbos meal is not going to have any more challah. It is not going to You finish your shal shudas. What are you going to have? You're going to have the brisket that you made, or you're going to have the chicken that you made, or whatever it is that you made for Shabbos. That's what you're going to eat now. Make sure that there's no chametz in any of it. Make sure that there's no matzah in any of it. The only chametz you're having is that chametz that is off to the side. Everything else is Pesach quality stuff, Pesach kosher stuff. Your house is ready to go for Pesach. This is the end of Shabbos morning. Now you have a beautiful afternoon. You have a beautiful Shabbos ahead of you. At some point after midday on Shabbos, the time that shal shudas should be eaten, obviously you can't at this point have any chametz. Chametz is done. Chametz is finished at 10:25, no more chametz. So all of your challah is done and there's no matzah. So what you should eat Shabbos afternoon should be, you should have a small little meal, not much. You should keep it light in order so that you're hungry at the Seder, but you should have meat, fish, eggs. You should eat those things the Shabbos afternoon, fruit Shabbos afternoon, and that should take place after, I believe it's 1:26 p.m. Okay, you want to make sure that you have a light snack in order to fulfill shal shudas according to all opinions. This is the basic schedule of food for Shabbos. Now, there's one other thing that I have to mention, which is how excited I am for that Shabbos. In God willing, this Shabbos I'm excited. Shabbos Hagadol Drasha. Look forward to learning with everybody on Shabbos afternoon at 5:45. And then the following Shabbos, Erev Pesach, I'm so excited because the first time since Brooke and I have been married with kids, we are going to have the opportunity to not feel absolutely exhausted at the Seder. And that's because we have Shabbos on our side. Shabbos, God willing, is going to be a great opportunity for us to be able to learn through the Haggadah and for us to be able to prepare our children for the Seder, play a game with our kids about Pesach. Like it's an unbelievable opportunity. Even take a nap. And you're going to feel refreshed, energized, ready to really have a meaningful Seder. In fact, this is really the whole purpose of Shabbos in general. The whole purpose of Shabbos is, as the Chavetz Chaim points out in his introduction to the Mishnah Berurah's laws on Shabbos, he writes, he says, the whole purpose of Shabbos, he quotes from Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz, is to reconnect with Hashem. And this is cited in the Torah. The Torah tells us the whole purpose of Shabbos. Leman ladas ki ani Hashem mekadshchem. To know that Hashem created us with a purpose. Hashem chose this nation, the Jewish nation, to be a nation that brings out Kedusha, that brings out morality, brings out God into the world. And that is the lesson of the Seder. The lesson of the Seder is to instill emunah in ourselves. That's supposed to carry us for a whole year, says the Netziv, until the next Seder when we recharge our batteries. That is what the whole purpose of the Seder is. That's the whole purpose of Shabbos. Can you think of a better way to prepare yourself for the night of emunah than a Shabbos? There's literally no better way. So there are some of these hoops we have to jump through. But if we do it the right way, it could be seamless Erev Pesach and a much enjoyable Erev Pesach, ideal Erev Pesach, in order so that it could be a truly, truly beautiful and uplifting Yontif for everybody. Okay, we will stop here for now. I'm going to stop the screen share, but I will now open it up to if anyone has any questions about everything that we discussed. Feel free to ask any questions. I have a few minutes. I'm happy to stay on and answer any questions regarding Erev Pesach that falls out on Shabbos. You could just unmute yourself if you have any questions.
Rabbi, don't some people use egg matzah instead of challah for when it happens this way?
Sure. So it's funny you bring that up, Nora. I was just speaking with Rav Hershel Schechter one of the Gedolei Ador, who we have the great pleasure is going to be joining us here in La Jolla in just about 6 weeks from now, 5 weeks from now. God willing, Rav Shechter is going to be here for Shabbos. It's just an unbelievable opportunity for our community. And I was speaking to Rabbi Shechter today, and I was asking him a number of questions regarding this and some other Pesach-related questions, and he shared an amazing anecdote with me that, when rabbis were finishing their smicha studies, finishing their studies of ordination to become a rabbi in Yeshiva University, so there was a final examination. The final examination today is a written exam. It's like an exit exam you would have right in a university or in a master's program in order to complete the program. So that's exactly what it is in most yeshivas, most kollels for getting smicha today. Back in the 40s and 50s, and I think even early 60s, I think it was not until the 70s that YU switched over. The final examination was an oral examination with a bezdin. The bezdin was made up of Dr. Samuel Belkin, who was the president of Yeshiva University, a student of the Chafetz Chaim, a massive Talmud Chacham, with Rabbi Soloveitchik, who you don't want to get anything wrong in front of the Rav, and Rav Moshe Shatzkis, who I think was known throughout Europe as having the sharpest mind of anybody. And you got drilled by these three massive Talmidei Chachamim. Rav Shechter told me that one of the classic questions that would be asked by Dr. Belkin to the student that's sitting in front of this bezdin was, what do you use for your Pesach meal on a year like this, where what do you use for your Shabbos meal, on a year like this, where Erev Pesach falls on Shabbos? So the student would respond exactly the way that we presented it, which is that you have the challah separated, and then you make a break, that 20-minute break, and then you have some more challah for shalosh shudas, and all that needs to be done by 10:25, and then you take the crumbs and you flush it down the toilet. All of that needs to be done early. This is what the student every single time would tell the bezdin. At this point, Rav Moshe Shatzkis would say, yes, that's exactly right. Rabbi Soloveitchik would say, no, that's completely wrong. You have to use egg matzahs. And they would get into a whole heated debate about which is the appropriate thing to do. So yes, there is an opinion out there that you use egg matzahs, but there are way too many complications with egg matzahs. There's too many things you have to rely on to use egg matzahs. It is certainly not the prevalent practice. The prevalent practice is to do it exactly the way that we prescribed. Challah, break, challah, all done by 10:25, and flush the crumbs down the toilet. Probably the most important reason why we don't use egg matzahs is based on the Rambam. The Rambam says, technically speaking, egg matzahs are matzahs. You can't eat matzah on Erev Pesach. It's as simple as that. That's the bottom line. So why the Rav said what he said, it's almost like we'll talk about it on another Wednesday night when we speak about the interesting opinions that exist out there. But it's certainly not the prevalent opinion. It's certainly not the prevalent practice either. Prevalent practice, the correct practice, is like Rav Moshe Shatzkis said to the yeshiva students in front of him, that you have the challah, break, challah, all done by 10:25, and flush the crumbs down the toilet. Okay. Any other questions?
Are you allowed to use, for the challah, if you don't want to have so much to get rid of, can you use you can use rolls, I guess, can you use slices?
So for shalosh shudas, if you're nervous that you are going to have too much left over, you're not going to know what to do with it. Shalosh shudas, you could use the slices that are left over from the first meal. Okay. By the way, what you do with the challah, we should mention also. What do I do with the challah? Once let's say there's a lot of challah left. It's not just crumbs. There's a lot of challah left. What do I do with it? So what you do is before, again, you gotta do this all You have to do all of this before 10:25. You bring this over to a non-Jewish neighbor and you give them. You say, hey, I have some extra challah. I can't, do you mind taking it off of my hands? We can't have chametz. You explain a little bit about Pesach to them. Do you mind taking it off my hands? And what they're going to do with it, if it's a slice of challah, they're going to take it and throw it in the garbage. But you want it off of your hands. You give it to a non-Jew, but try and just eat up whatever's left before 10:25. Use some small rolls. The amount that one needs to eat, by the way, is really just one medium slice for each of those meals. One medium slice for the first part, one medium slice for the second part that takes place before 10:25. That's it, 2 slices of challah, right? So you can use small rolls also to, make sure that you get, out of this whole conundrum.
Could you use slices of bread for the Friday night as well as the 2 meals on Shabbos?
So you should use whole rolls for Friday night and Shabbos morning. And then that after that 20-minute break, when you're having part B, if you need to, you can use slices, but it's better to use whole rolls.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I heard that one can pre-designate a bleach mix prior to Shabbos for using to pour over if they have a lot of leftover matzah. Is that true?
A lot of leftover challah?
Yes, challah, sorry, it's late.
No. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So I wouldn't recommend it. The reason is because according to, where the Shulchan Aruch says that, when the Shulchan Aruch gives the different ways that one can fulfill the obligation of destroying their chametz, he says you burn it, or if you can't burn it, you throw it in the river, you throw it in the sea, you crumble it up into pieces and throw it in the wind. And because of that, because it's not a prescribed version of destruction of chametz, therefore it's unclear whether or not it actually works as a form of destruction of chametz. Number one. And number two is that it really does get into laws of muksa when you're using those materials on Shabbos for something like that. So I think if you just to make sure that you cover your bases, probably the best thing to do would be to just have as little as you can while still having enough to fulfill your obligation. Like I said, just, all you need is just, the amount of a medium slice of challah for Friday night, Shabbos morning, and Shalah Shuddis. Just keep it as light as possible with as little challah as possible. And if you have a lot of leftover, so, it's, if it's possible, to find a non-Jew to take it off your hands, that's the best thing to do. Otherwise, you could also just, wrap it up and you could even put it with your chametz stuff. You can even wrap it up in a bag or something and put it in your, put it with your chametz. Now that should just be done before 11:38, but you should, or 11:39, whatever the time is, but you can, if you really do have a lot that you can't just flush down the toilet and you can't eat it quick enough, then just take that and put it with your chametz products.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi. It's very helpful.
Okay, my pleasure. All right. Like I said, if anyone has any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to me. There is this little guide, as I pointed out before, that just goes through step by step exactly what to do. Sent out by the shul already, will be sent out again. Use that as a reference guide for yourselves. And God willing, this will be a Chag Kosher V'Sameach. And it will be, I myself am looking forward to it, and I encourage everyone to do what you can that Shabbos, that you'll have a long day to really prepare for a beautiful Seder, that you'll have the opportunity to learn Torah, to take it easy. It's not going to be running around. There's not going to be matzah balls flying all over the kitchen. There's not going to be potato slices, peels flying all over the kitchen. It is going to be a relaxing Erev Pesach. You even imagine such a thing? God willing, it is going to be a Pesach that we are invigorated by, we are uplifted by, and one that Emunah is instilled within us by. Okay, everyone. A Chag Kosher v'Sameach. God willing, tomorrow night will be the koshering crash course that is going to be taking place right here at 8 o'clock tomorrow night, so that we can have our kitchens ready for Pesach as well.